Hello, it's Friday the 22nd of July 2050 and it's been another extremely hot day across the UK. However, there is a glimmer of hope for some cooler conditions towards the middle of next week. Widely today, temperatures exceeded 36 Celsius, with temperatures from Southampton to Birmingham exceeding 40 degrees and a high of 43 degrees in Worcester. This follows 9 days with temperatures in excess of 30 Celsius in Scotland and 34 degrees across England and Wales. Little relief tonight either, with temperatures remaining at or above 20 Celsius for much of the country. And with the combination of high daytime and high nighttime temperatures, a heat health warning is currently in force. Little relief for those vulnerable to warmer weather. The advice is to look out for others, especially those in high-risk groups. Close curtains in rooms that face the sun to keep indoor spaces cooler. And remember that at times, particularly at night, it might be cooler outdoors than indoors. As we start the weekend, high pressure over Scandinavia continues to draw hot air across the UK from the near continent, but relief is on the way as this low approaches later in the weekend and for the start of next week. Nevertheless, we start the weekend with that heat still in place. Temperatures quickly rising again across the UK. More than 37 degrees from southern Scotland throughout much of England and Wales, and more than 40 for parts of England and Wales, with 43 to 45 expected around Somerset, Dorset, Devon and Wiltshire. Again on Sunday, widely a very hot day. Once again, temperatures into the 40s. But a welcome change is on the way for the start of next week. Much cooler northwesterly winds arrive, and Scotland as well as northern England seeing temperatures drop back into the mid-20s for the start of the week, and then by the middle of next week the cooler air finally reaches the south of England and South Wales. If this happens, it will finally be the end of a heatwave, which for 14 consecutive days has seen much of the UK higher than 30 degrees, peaking in the 40s. Now, this has been an extended period as well, with little notable rainfall over the UK. Such a prolonged heatwave can be a risk to the fit and healthy and not just to vulnerable groups. Remember, drink plenty of fluids, dress appropriately for the weather and slow down when it is hot. If you travel on the London Underground, you'll know how hot it can get in weather like this. Of course, this heatwave is part of yet another summer with hotter and drier conditions than we used to experience just 30 years ago, with the typical summer now experiencing high peak temperatures and more days over 30 degrees. For those areas that currently have hosepipe bans, I'm afraid there's little sign in the forecast of significant rain. In global weather news, we are seeing the continuation of an extremely dangerous heatwave in India. Temperatures in Delhi reached 48 degrees today, and many places across the rest of the country saw temperatures in the low to mid-40s. In combination with high humidity, heat stress conditions have once again been extreme, meaning a real risk to life for people who can't escape the heat by staying in a cooled environment indoors. The authorities there are continuing their ban on outdoor working, so all farming and construction remains at a standstill. Thankfully, this wasn't a real forecast. It was recorded in 2020 to show one possible scenario for how a summer heatwave could affect the UK in 30 years' time. When we first recorded this, it was shocking to stand in front of a weather map and talk about temperatures exceeding 40 Celsius, even if it was a plausible scenario based on climate model projections. At that point, the highest temperature ever recorded in the UK was 38.7 Celsius, so it was difficult to imagine temperatures into the 40s in the UK even after 3 decades of additional global warming. As it turned out, it didn't take 3 decades. It didn't even take 3 years. In July 2022, during an extraordinary heatwave, the UK recorded higher than 40 Celsius for the first time in 7 separate locations. In a pre-industrial climate, recording 40 Celsius in the UK was virtually impossible. In our current climate, in which greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide have been rising in our atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution and the world has warmed by more than a degree Celsius, the probability of 40 Celsius in any given year has rapidly increased. And with every fraction of a degree of global warming, that probability increases further. That's why the scenario presented in this video is plausible if global warming continues unabated. There is still uncertainty. Much of the uncertainty is because our climate in 2050 depends on how much we reduce greenhouse gases in the years to come. If greenhouse gases rise following a high emissions scenario throughout the 21st century, this middle line shows the most likely temperature rise by 2050. 1.7 degrees by 2050, more than 4 degrees by 2100. The shaded area represents the full range of likely temperatures. However, if greenhouse gas emissions start to be cut now and reduced to zero by around 2070, the rise will be 1.6 degrees by 2050 and 1.7 by 2100. In other words, action now will make a difference by 2050, but an even bigger difference by 2100. Current policies would take us between the red and blue lines. Of course, more ambitious emissions reductions could limit warming further. The UK has committed to bringing its own emission to net zero by 2050. The July 2050 forecast was based on a high emissions scenario. It's useful to illustrate how our weather patterns may change and what that could look like if we don't curb emissions. Of course, the UK's weather will continue to be highly variable. The hot summer forecast followed a dry spring and winter, but on average, if high emissions continue, winter rainfall would increase 7% higher by 2050, increasing the risk of flooding. Summer rainfall would decrease 15% lower by 2050. Again, the shaded areas show the range of likely values. Warmer, wetter winters, hotter, drier summers. We already have an idea of what this would feel like. There has been some devastating flooding in parts of the UK during recent years. For example, eastern Scotland in October 2023 and the Midlands in September 2024. Summer 2018 was the hottest summer on record, and we then experienced the exceptional heat waves of 2022. Hotter, drier summers may not sound like a bad outcome, but as you saw in the example forecast, such widespread and long-lasting heat with little relief at night can cause a significant health risk, especially for vulnerable people. If no action is taken to reduce emissions, those problems will only increase in the future. As well as undertaking scientific research to help understand the necessity of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, our climate research also contributes to the understanding around the changes we will need to make as a society in order to adapt to the already changing climate in the UK and around the globe, from heat impacts on buildings to food security.